You're listening to Hooked on Creek, a podcast celebrating the music, history, and fans of the legendary jam band Max Creek. I am your host, Korre Johnson, and this is episode 43.
Early one morning the sun was rising as I was laying in bed, wondering if she'd change it all if her hair was still red. Well, folks said a life together sure was gonna be rough. I never did lie, mama's only dress, I promised Mac was a big love.
Thank you for joining me on Hooked on Creek. I'm so glad you are here with me because I have something very special to share with you, my interview with Eamon Cronin. Eamon is a musician and performing artist with deep connections to Max Creek that date back to the early 1980s. In this episode, Eamon talks about his introduction to Max Creek, his friendship with Rob Fried, his experiences singing and playing drums with Max Creek, and his appreciation of the Creek family that has supported this band over the years. Eamon also talks about his band Riders on the Storm and his thoughts on Jim Morrison, the iconic frontman of The Doors. But then stick around because I wrap up this episode by playing some incredible live performances featuring Eamon Cronin on vocals with Max Creek. As a reminder, if you have feedback about this episode, head over to hookedoncreek.com and click the contact link and let me know what you think. And one quick note before we get started, after Eamon and I recorded our conversation, he sent me an email emphasizing that he thinks Max Creek is not a jam band, but instead, Max Creek is a band that jams. So, with that in mind, let's get started. Eamon Cronin, welcome to Hooked on Creek.
Thanks for having me.
Eamon, to begin with, why don't you tell me about the first time you heard about this band called Max Creek?
Well, it was quite by accident. My sister was dating a guy whose brother was in a punk band, and this was 81. I had started playing drums like a year before, so they let me tag along. And we went to the Cell Block 11 to pick up some equipment, and I saw Creek for the first time, and I saw all these people having a blast and boogieing and having fun. And then later on, that was when I discovered that Cell Block 11 was where Drink the Stars was recorded. And then 94, I started seeing them on a regular basis at the Agora Ballroom in West Hartford, at Lupo's in the Living Room in Providence. And it just took off from there. I've been seeing them ever since.
So were you a fan of the Grateful Dead and sort of the jam band music at that time?
Not really so much. I was more into the Dead after this. Like after I graduated high school, I'd go on tour, and see the country and be into the Grateful Dead. I personally prefer Max Creek.
Tell me about those first experiences seeing Max Creek in some of those early clubs. What was that experience like?
It was wonderful. The Agora Ballroom in West Hartford was not far, and it was kind of a lawless place, which was nice because the crowd kind of, they controlled themselves. And I met Rob Fried at a drum store in 81. I was taking lessons. He brought DeGuglielmo with him to show him this cool drum store. And Rob and I hit it off, became very good friends. He was my first friend in Creek, and wound up later on being really tight. I would stay at his house, and so I went to a lot of shows.
For those of us who came on board with Max Creek after Rob Fried passed away, tell us about Rob. What type of person was he?
He was a great guy. He was very generous and sensitive. He was a great player. He had a beautiful house, and we used to stay there. I met Rob where I was taking lessons, and he was with the Googs. And so we used to trade like notes on different, patterns and things in percussion, and just became good friends. And he was just a real genuine guy. He was a real close friend of mine, and he was the one who kind of would bring me backstage at first, and that's when I met other guys in the band, and it was just a great experience.
Did you think you'd have a an interest in pursuing music at that time, or is it more just a hobby on the side?
Oh no, it's absolutely. It was. I made my life decisions when I was like 14.
Well, tell me about that. What type of musical influences are surrounding you at that time?
Well, I studied with this guy named Larry Donatelli, who was an excellent player, and he taught me a lot of polyrhythms and jazz stuff. And after the high school, I went to the Hartford Conservatory of Music, and that's when I really started getting into Coltrane and bebop stuff, and really just started exploring all kinds of music. I was raised by a professional musician, and he played like 6 instruments. So music was always around our house. He was from Ireland, so there was a lot of Irish music around our house, but my mother loved country western. My dad also stretched out into, Charlie Mingus and, heavy jazz guys. So I just decided early on, this is it. And 41 years later, I'm still doing it.
Yeah. You'd mentioned that you got an opportunity to meet more of the band members. What were your first impressions of some of the other band members in Max Creek at that time?
It was interesting because at that time they were playing a lot, like 4 or 5 nights a week. So, they were a little smoked, but they were nice guys. John seemed a little distant. He was the leader of the band. I'm sure everyone wanted a piece of him, so he had to take care of business. Mark was always a sweet, sensitive guy. And Scott and I used to bust each other hard and tell each other like bad jokes and stuff. Yeah, I got along with all of them.
And how did you first get those opportunities to start to play with the band? Because I understand you've played drums with Max Creek and you've sang with Max Creek. How did those first invitations start?
Well, the first time I played a full night on drums was 1990 when MCMXC came out. I played with them at the Wetlands in New York City. In 92-ish, I started singing with them because we were all playing at this club in New Britain, Connecticut called The Sting. And it was a big place. And I had been playing there with Riders. And they invited me up, and I kept coming back. They kept having me back.
What was it like for you? Because, both a fan of Max Creek, but then also a musician yourself, getting the opportunity to go on stage with them. Was that special for you?
Yeah, it was great. It was pretty cool, and it made a different dynamic to our relationships with each other, and we were getting tighter and tighter as friends too. It was a wonderful experience. The crowd went bananas because I was really popular at this place anyway, and Creek, of course, was killing it. So it was a great crowd response. It was sweet playing with these guys I admired so much for quite some time. And onwards and upwards. I did some other drumming stuff with them, and I've sang with them a bunch of times, including one time at the living room when Vaso was playing drums, and we just impromptu did The End by the Doors. Like, we hadn't rehearsed it or anything, so I'm kind of like coaching Vaso through it. And, it sounds great. You can get the tape or hear it on archive.org, probably.
Yeah, I think I've heard that. It is incredible. You're bringing up The End, which is a song by The Doors. At what point in time did the music that you were making come in contact with Riders on the Storm and being close to the music of The Doors? Had that already started, or that happened later?
Well, it started when I was like 14 or 15. I used to sing along to records, and I would sound a lot like these people. And then, I got the first Doors album, and I listened to it until there was no grooves on it. And I just started singing along. And then I played with a little band called Crystal Ship, which was the first Doors tribute that started in New Jersey in 1977. And then when the singer moved away, I had a gig booked for that band. So I'm like, we got to go for it. I got 3 guys that I went to the Hartford Conservatory with. We picked about 20-something songs, and we went through with the band, and that was March of 1990. We're still going. We just played in Atlantic City. We've been to about 24 countries, and almost killed me in Spain one time.
And so this is your band, Riders on the Storm. What is it like stepping into the role of, well, Jim Morrison, one of the most influential and iconic frontmen in rock history? What does that feel like?
I don't have a problem with it because, I love it. And I've been playing music for a long, long time. So it's been rewarding for the most part. And, you kind of get into the role when you're strapping on those leather pants every night. You better go with it and make it as good as possible.
Do you ever wonder what if Jim Morrison didn't pass away? Like, where would he be now, and how would his life have continued to influence music?
I was thinking about this actually yesterday, and I don't think he would be really playing music that much. I think he'd be more into writing screenplays and putting out books of poetry and that kind of thing. He was stepping away from music when they made L.A. Woman, and that was the 7th album they were obligated to make on Elektra Records. So that's unfortunately where it ended. And then he ended in 71. I don't know what he'd be doing right now, but I do think about it sometimes. But, I don't know. I've interviewed Robbie Krieger a few times. Our keyboard player from Riders has toured with Robbie. You get to chat with him about certain things, but no one knows what he'd be doing, right? He'd be almost 70, and I never met Ray or John, but Robbie was a real nice guy. I interviewed him a couple times for my radio show, and it feels good to go do it because, well, at this point, we're really nailing it, but I consider it Riders on the Storm. I don't even consider it a Doors tribute. It's just, we all work really hard at it. We have the vintage equipment. I've had my outfits made custom and my concha belt, my Beatle boots and all that. So it comes along naturally at this point.
Mm-hmm. I've listened to a handful of recordings. I've watched some YouTube videos, and Eamon, it is amazing to see that this band that you have. It does take me to another place, and I can close my eyes and I imagine I'm right there, So
that's great. That's wonderful. I'm very fortunate.
You mentioned earlier that you weren't really into the Grateful Dead right away.
Not so much.
I'm wondering though, with your experience and your proximity to Max Creek and then your familiarity with the Grateful Dead, what do you see as the difference between how Max Creek approaches jam band music versus Grateful Dead? What distinguishes Max Creek?
Well, it's apples and oranges in my eyes. Grateful Dead had their roots in like jug band music and stuff, and Max Creek was always just kind of a loose band, but they go through a lot of genres. They play reggae tunes, they play hard rock stuff, they play sleepy stuff, So I always preferred them, even to this day. And I saw a bunch of Grateful Dead shows. I don't even know how many Max Creek shows I've seen. It's impossible to really tally up.
Yeah. My understanding is that you, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but did you audition to be the drummer in Max Creek after Vasso left in 96?
Yeah, but what happened was I was actually on the gig with Rob Fried at the Living Room in Providence. So I've been playing with them on and off, and I wanted the gig. And then Allshouse sat in that same night, and he started playing all his chops and everything else. And Rob was pissed, and he just threw his drumsticks on the timbales and walked off stage. And he goes, I know he's going to get the gig. I know Scott's going to pick him. So, but then they worked things out, I guess, eventually. There was a little rift towards the end when he left Max Creek. But, it was an experience.
Well, I wonder, in your opinion, what type of impact has Max Creek made on the music scene in New England? Because this band, to me, from my perspective in Milwaukee, seems to have influenced a lot of other bands and it put a mark, I think, on the jam band scene, certainly. But
Absolutely.
from your perspective, what type of impact has Max Creek had?
They've been so good for so long. It's undeniable. Like, they never failed to deliver. I mean, Ryder would drop the bomb at least once a show. I don't know. I just think that there's actually right now, and I've been waiting for this for years. There's a band called Something Is Forming that is a Max Creek tribute band.
Mm-hmm.
And the guitar player, John Spagnese, he's really good, and he's played with Scott before and stuff. I've heard them on tape. They sound pretty good. So, I mean, they've definitely had an impact on us locals. And, it's far-reaching.
Well, I'm wondering, what are some of your favorite Max Creek songs?
Emerald Eyes, Devil's Heart, If You Ask Me. I like Katie May. I really like Emerald Eyes, and I think that might be my favorite.
When you look back at all the shows you've seen since the mid-'80s, is there a show or two that stand out to you as memorable? And if so, why?
Oh, yeah, there sure is. The Camp Creeks were always good. They were at the Arrowhead Ranch when I first started going. And that was an experience. I was doing pirate radio in South Dakota at the Sturgis Rally with Wolfman Jack and Eric Burden and Robbie Krieger and Albert Collins. And I took 3 planes back to New York to play with the Midnight Sun, my original band, and at the Arrowhead Ranch in Parksville, the Hippie Horse Ranch. And then I took 3 planes back to South Dakota. That was a good one. And then later on, I brought them to the Indian Lookout Country Club, upstate New York, which is the home of the Harley Rendezvous Classic, which is a biker event, big one that I've been doing since the 80s. And that really clicked. And everyone had a blast. And again, it was kind of a loose setting, but open fires, glass bottles, tanks of nitrous, nitrous gas, So it was cool. And then Sally moved it to Odetta a couple of years ago. And I said to her when we first got it there, I said, I feel like we've graduated.
Well, it's the only Camp Creek I've been to the last 2 years, and it's a beautiful campground and just a great time.
It is.
And Eamon, I think you had the opportunity to play with Mike Gordon with Max Creek too. Is that right?
He was playing with Creek up in Vermont, where he's from. And I was at the show. I think it was Nectar's. I'm not sure. And I wound up getting called up while he was still on stage. And I don't even really remember what we played, but I did that twice, I think, with Mike Gordon. Yeah, I saw Fish one time by accident. And that's it.
Yeah. You've known the band for quite a number of years, and I'm wondering if there's something you know about Max Creek that you think most people don't know.
Well, Scott used to not be able to play because he was too young, so they wouldn't let him in the clubs, even when the drinking age was 18. Mark graduated from the art school with a liturgical music thing, so he's got a real, he can play honky-tonk and stuff, but he can play classical style stuff. Scott's very versatile, and Ryder's just a rock. So I think that's what makes them who they are.
So now when you go to a Max Creek show, what do you look forward to when you're in the crowd and you're looking up at stage and you're around all these Creek freaks?
I love seeing the Creek freaks. If I just think about them, I get choked up because they've been such a beautiful part of my life. So many memories and so many people that have come and gone. So I really don't go with expectations. I just try to enjoy what happens. And I do want to hear certain tunes, but not every single time. But I don't really try to anticipate what's going to happen because you really don't know.
Do you think that Max Creek has evolved and changed their approach to their music over the years? Like if you were to listen to Emerald Eyes from the 80s versus, more recently or some other songs, how would you characterize how that band has evolved?
Well, I'm just saying that they have evolved. I'm not saying they took a different direction or anything. I just think they got better at what they loved and did, and other songs came out. Other band members, drummers particularly, came and went. So that was kind of interesting. But I think they're on a good path right now. They got Jay Morrell Stanley on percussion again. Percussion was really kind of missed since Rob left the band. So I think they're having fun with it. And they're going forward for 51 years. So I think whatever they're evolved into it's working. Works for me. Works for a lot of people.
Well, why do you think it is that Max Creek has been able to keep it together for now over 50 years? What is it? What are they doing right?
I have no idea. And I think they love each other in a certain way, and they love what they do. And they've been playing for so long in front of so many people that they too have developed relationships with fans and things. I call them my Creek family. I love those people. So I think that's what's kept them going, and they deliver, and they never stopped.
Eamon Cronin, I really enjoyed talking with you. Thank you so much for joining me on Hooked on Creek.
I enjoyed it very much. Thank you for having me.
All right, that concludes my interview with Eamon Cronin. But now stay tuned, because coming up next, I'm going to play a couple tunes featuring Eamon Cronin on vocals, performed live with Max Creek. But first, if you're curious, during the introduction to this episode, I played a portion of Max Creek's performance of Tangled Up in Blue, featuring Eamon Cronin on vocals, performed live on December 27th, 1996 at Lupo's Heartbreak Hotel in Providence, Rhode Island. Now, if you're listening to this while driving or operating heavy machinery, I suggest pausing this episode until you can find a time and place to prepare your head for the two songs that are coming up next. First, you're going to hear Max Creek with special guest Eamon Cronin on vocals, performing a cover of The End by The Doors. Then you will hear Max Creek with special guest Eamon Cronin on vocals, performing One Way Out, a song first recorded and released in the early 1960s by Sonny Boy Williamson and Elmore James, but then popularized in the early 1970s by the Allman Brothers. All right, this is Max Creek with Eamon Cronin performing The End live at the Living Room in Providence, Rhode Island on December 9th, 1994.
where it seems inside the gold mine. Ride the highway west, baby. Ride the sled to the lane, the ancient lane, baby. The snake is gone, 7 miles. He's on, and his skin is gone. Ride the highway west, baby. The west is the best. The west is the best. You're here, and we'll do the rest. Is calling up. New worlds is calling up. Travel where you take it up. The killer awoke before dawn. He put his boots on. He took a face from the ancient gallery and he walked on down the hall. He went to the room where his sister lived, and then he paid a visit to his brother, and then he walked on down the hall. And he came to the door. And he looked inside. Father, yes, son, I want to kill you. Father,
And now this is Max Creek with Eamon Cronin performing One Way Out live at Toad's Place in New Haven, Connecticut on May 12th, 2000.
Second floor, like about this town, and I won't be back in no more. Where you winner, baby? Agony's house on this slow. There was only one big mama talking out, mister, they don't know. be your man. Oh, baby, I just don't know.
And that concludes episode 43 of Hooked on Creek. Huge thanks to Eamon Cronin for joining me on the podcast. It was an honor for me to get the opportunity to talk with him. And thank you for listening. If you have feedback about this episode, head over to the Hooked on Creek website at hookedoncreek.com and click the contact link to send me a message. I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks for tuning in.